Hi everyone, my name is Julia. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. It's 2025. It is the depths of January, the coldest, darkest time of the year. I took a little break over the holidays, traveled, saw family, and it took us a little while to sort of get back into the rhythm of things at home. While I was off taking a YouTube break, we recently celebrated my son's first birthday, which coincidentally means that I have now been a mother and a parent for 1 year, which is really hard to believe. But at the same time, I'm like, that little stranger that we brought into our home has only been here for a year. Like, haven't we known him for our entire lives? He's the best. Love him so much. I had said previously that I would talk at some point about the challenges that I had postpartum and sort of what that experience was like for me. And I figure now is probably a good time to have like a year of perspective and just really having time to reflect and even seeing how far I am from where I was 6 months ago. It's just kind of a crazy thing to experience. My labor and delivery was pretty uneventful, to be honest. He came 12 days before his due date, but honestly, like, we were ready. I mean, we weren't ready. You're never ready, but it was kind of perfect timing. We, had hospital bags packed. Car seat had been installed in the car long ago. We had just finished watching the birthing course that we had purchased like the day before. It was kind of crazy timing. Yeah, I went into labor. My water broke at 2 in the morning. I had spontaneous rupture of waters, which basically means I didn't have any contractions or anything before my water broke. So that happened at 2 in the morning. I labored at home for a little while, and then we went into the hospital in the morning. Between my water breaking and baby being born, it was 13 hours. 3 of those hours I was pushing, and that is the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. It was so exhausting. I was so tired. I was so nauseous, and the midwife kept asking, like, do you want to take a break? You can take a break. And I'm like, no, I just want to be done. I just want this baby to be here. I remembered something that people say is like, right when you feel like you can't keep going, that's when your baby is almost there. And I was like, BS. I felt like that for so long, but I knew, I was like, baby is coming. I didn't want to keep going, but I knew that it was my only option. And yeah, so I kept going. I did have an epidural. Going into it, I did not know if I wanted an epidural, so I had planned that I might not get one. And then on the way to the hospital, when I was having contractions, I was like, if we get there and I'm 2 centimeters dilated, I'm gonna scream. Cause sorry, someone was at the door. I didn't know how much worse it was gonna get. And so being in that place and feeling like, oh my God, this could be so much worse. Like, maybe I'm getting there. Maybe this is just the beginning. By the time I got to the hospital and through triage and everything, I was 6 centimeters dilated, and I was like, I will take that epidural, please. So that was great. And baby came healthy, truly no complications there. I did have a 2nd-degree tear, which is quite normal, but it was a little bit complex. It wasn't like a super clean tear, so they did bring in a surgeon just to make sure that I was getting sutured properly. And as it turns out, like, I did have some small complications there, which did sort of like impact my physical recovery, and also I think it really did impact my mental health. I'll get there later. But baby was healthy. Everything went fine. I was so physically exhausted because, I was up since 2 a.m. when my water broke. All in all, like, a relatively positive, fine experience. My first night in recovery, however, I had a really terrible nurse, and I didn't even really realize it at the beginning. She was just like a little bit neglectful. My room wasn't like properly stocked with the supplies that it should have been, which I didn't know at the time because I also didn't know like exactly what it was supposed to be stocked with. She did not really like keep up on my pain management, so she would write on the board like what time I could have my next Advil or Tylenol, but I'm delirious. I'm not thinking like, oh, it's 4 a.m. Hi, can I get my Advil? And so she also didn't come and check at all with me. Yeah, it was just like I was very physically uncomfortable, and I also had a cold, and so I was just like, I was not doing super well. And the next morning at like 6 a.m., whatever it is, when they switched shifts and the new nurse came in, and she asked me what my pain level was, and I was like, oh, like a 7 or an 8, and she's like, oh my God, well, you haven't had any pain meds in hours. Let's get that to you. And I was like, yeah, they were not offered to me. I was not checked on. And she's like, okay, well, that will not happen. I'm going to put here in your chart that we're going to just keep you on the, you know, alternating schedule of Advil and Tylenol. Like, we're just going to keep you on it. And I said, thank you. And she also, we said, oh, we're like low on, I don't know what it was, ice packs or something, one of my postpartum recovery supplies. And she went and she was like, oh, you guys are missing a bunch of stuff. Like, I'm going to get you totally restocked. So yeah, that was just like not a great experience either. But after that, my nurses after that were all wonderful. And the midwife who delivered me is not the midwife that I saw all through my pregnancy, but she was actually at the hospital the day that I was discharged. So she did come through and I did get to see her. And so that was like a really nice sort of cap on my hospital stay, to get to see her and talk about, you know, how that experience went, and she could see our baby and all that. And then suddenly we were parents. The way that I planned my parental leave at work was I took 8 weeks off completely straight, no work. And then I went back part-time. I worked 3 days a week for 10 weeks after that. So I didn't go back full-time until my son was like 18 weeks old. And that is when he started daycare. My husband is self-employed, so he could take time off, but it also meant that he wasn't making any money. He didn't have like parental leave, anything like that. So he did take some time off, but then he also went back to work. And when he went back to work, he was really working like evenings, and I had a lot of like stress and anxiety around all of this new phase of life, which I will talk about. Postpartum moms know you kind of get those sundown scaries. And so I spent a lot of that time when I would already have those kind of overwhelming feelings of sadness and loneliness. I was going through that alone because my husband also wasn't physically there, and that was not his fault. That's just the nature of his schedule. So a lot of nights feeling very overwhelmed by myself, and it was the dead of winter. It was dark at 4 p.m. I felt very lonely and very isolated in that. I also know my experience is only my own. I've only ever had one child. I cannot speak from any other experience, but I think our son is like a little more like higher needs than other babies. Like, first of all, he's loud. He has always been loud, even since he was a newborn. Like, he opens his mouth and he wails and he wails, and sleep has never been easy for him. Until he went to daycare, he did not nap in a crib or a bassinet. He only contact napped, which I'm so grateful that we had so much of that special time. But like, sometimes you gotta pee, sometimes you're hungry, like sometimes you just need a shower. And I felt really tethered and sort of beholden to his needs and his schedule. Yeah, I mean, obviously he's a baby, but when I was already experiencing some mental health challenges, that became very difficult for me to just always have to hold him to sleep. I have a little like 1 line a day book that I kept notes in, And so in my memory, like, I didn't feel very challenged or overwhelmed until like several months later. But looking back in that book, I'm like, oh, I felt like this pretty early on, that it was just like a lot of work, and maybe more work than other babies. If I don't have the context to know that, but it just felt like that. And I also knew that I was struggling more. I seemed to be having a harder time than other people around me, and even than my husband. And of course, like, moms and dads are different. Like, different partners have different experiences. Sorry, just avoiding, chasing the shadows here. I just felt like I was overwhelmed so much more than my husband was. I was having so much of a harder time being alone with the baby. And I feel really grateful that I never had any like negative feelings towards him. I can't imagine how challenging that is, to have all of the feelings that I was having and then also look at that baby and be angry at it. Now, don't get me wrong, there'd totally be times, and still are times, when I'm like, oh my God, go to sleep, stop crying, like whatever it is. But yeah, none of my like emotional challenges were directed at the baby. It was more just like circumstantial for me. I also have to rewind and say that I had mastitis 3 times in my first 2 months postpartum. I had it at 2 weeks, I had it at 4 weeks, and then I had it at like 2 months. And each of those times it was incredibly painful. I got so sick, like flu-like symptoms, and I needed antibiotics to get better. And like immediately I would get better when I would start the antibiotics. But it was emotionally very challenging. My son was exclusively breastfed. I am so grateful for my lactation consultant. I had an awesome IBCLC, International Board Certified Lactation Consultant, who, I mean, she was like my savior through my early postpartum time. That was another thing at the hospital. 2 lactation consultants came to visit me, and they contradicted each other. When he was born and he latched, I felt like, okay, like I'm doing it. He's latching. I can feel that my milk is coming in. Then like I saw the first one and she kind of gave me information, and then I saw the second one and she told me that everything that I was doing was wrong, and no, that's not how you should be doing it. And I just lost all confidence. So having this one woman come to my house and just like give me the confidence, tell me that I was doing it right. She did weighted feeds. I was really concerned that our son was not eating enough. I also worried that he had a condition called pyloric stenosis, which is basically where the sphincter that connects your stomach to your intestines isn't formed properly, and so it restricts the food from like moving into the intestines, and you're not able to absorb the nutrients, and also you spit up a lot. And our son spat up a lot. So like I was worried that he wasn't eating enough. So she came over and she would do weighted feeds. Yeah, there was just like a lot of anxiety for me around his health. I mean, and you know, he was born during cold and flu season, and just constantly worrying that he was going to be sick. We actually ended up, I went to the hospital the first time I had mastitis because my fever was not going down, even having started antibiotics and taking pain relief, fever reducing medication. So we did end up at the hospital one night, and you know, it's like you don't really want to take a newborn baby into the emergency room full of people sick with cold, flu, COVID, all of the above. But that was really the only option because I couldn't drive myself. We couldn't leave the baby at home. Yeah, just like lots of worry about his health and his safety. I remember being especially concerned about positional asphyxiation and just wanting to make sure that he was not in any precarious position, that he was able to breathe and stay warm and safe and healthy and growing. And that slowly over time really started to eat away at me. My mental health was like slowly declining, so much that I didn't even totally realize it at the time. I was just constantly overwhelmed. The house was just like always in a state of chaos, which like that wasn't the bad part. It was just that I felt like I couldn't catch up. And when the house is a mess, I don't feel calm. So like I had two options: do the extreme, do what I was not capable of doing, and keep the house clean, or live with the mess and have it impact my mental health. And that's where I was. So on top of whatever else was happening, I just felt like I couldn't keep up with the house that would help me feel better. I was struggling with division of labor, with my husband being busy with work, and then I went back to work, and then our son started daycare at 4 months old. He went through his 4-month sleep regression. He got a number of daycare colds, which is totally normal, but you know, it screwed up with his sleep. It was hard to watch him be sick, and also just having to like take time off of work to stay home with him when he was sick. And I just consistently felt unable to carve any time for myself, especially as a breastfeeding mom. It was just, I felt like I was always on call and didn't get a break, didn't get time away in the same way that my husband did. So I ended up doing a lot of solo parenting, not by any fault of my husband, like that's just the way that his schedule works. And so I felt the burden of that, and also felt the burden of housework and all these things. And so it was about 6 months postpartum that I had the realization one day that it shouldn't be this hard to get through a day. There was not a single day where I was not feeling extremely overwhelmed, and just like something was always wrong. I could never just like get a handle on the day, and it didn't seem like other people were having as hard a time as I was. Obviously, social media is social media, but I just felt like I wasn't seeing people have this hard of a time with new babies, and then maybe this isn't normal, and maybe I need to seek some professional help. So around 6 months postpartum, I reached out to my midwife about postpartum depression and anxiety. That biggest symptom for me was the overwhelm, which is more tied to the postpartum anxiety than the postpartum depression, but I definitely had both. Didn't get like formal diagnosis for those, but I did start talk therapy pretty much right away. And at some point later, I did talk about adding medication as part of my treatment plan, but at the time we sort of decided that was not, it didn't totally make sense to add that. One of the things that she had shared was like, when you add medication as part of a treatment plan for something like postpartum anxiety or depression, what are we hoping to treat? And it felt like at that point, it was more the circumstances of my life that I wanted to treat or needed to treat. Like, we don't have family that live close by. My husband has a non-traditional work schedule, which means that I'm doing a lot of the non-daycare hours alone. Those are things that medication can't change. So adding medication isn't necessarily going to help me in that specific time, because the circumstances that are causing me to feel distress aren't changing. That is personally my experience. That is not to say that anybody watching should not seek medication. In fact, I think that it can be life-saving and so important for so many people. Just to say, that is the discussion, the individual discussion that I had with my doctor, and where we finally made a decision. That is also not to say that I will never add anxiety medication. I have definitely had anxiety undiagnosed my entire life, and it was relatively self-managed. I think that that's part of this whole thing, is like, there was this vein underlying anyway, like a tendency for overwhelm, a desire for control in my life, and having a baby just kind of like threw all the doors open, and I suddenly felt like very out of control. So that definitely like exacerbated my postpartum experience. Now, more than a year out from becoming a mom, and you know, like half a year out from really that like deepest, darkest part of my life, I feel so much better. I still feel challenged every day. Being a parent is no joke. It is a lot of work. You know, now we've got a little one who's toddling and he's got opinions and he doesn't have a whole lot of words to express them. So, you know, we're entering a whole new set of challenges. In terms of my mental health, I am so much better than I was, but like a week ago, I literally was in tears like the whole day because we were going through a certain set of circumstances that were just like very emotionally challenging for me, and I felt overwhelmed. I felt just like responsible as a parent for his happiness, and in ways I felt like I was depriving that. I mean, it's really not even important what the circumstances were, but like I'm still having ups and downs. I have better tools in my tool belt to assess situations and like give myself more grace, communicate better with my husband. I decided that I really did want to share all of this because one of the biggest parts of this whole experience for me was the feeling of isolation and loneliness, even when I had a partner who was right there. And then a lot of the time I physically didn't have him right there at those long nights that I was alone. I just want anyone who's watching this to know that if you're feeling that way, you aren't alone. Other people feel that way, but that doesn't mean that it's normal, and there is help to be had. I really do encourage you to reach out to your healthcare providers if you are experiencing any of those symptoms. If you think you might have postpartum depression, anxiety, psychosis, rage, any of those things, it is common, but it's not normal, and help is out there for you. You're not alone. You're not crazy. It's hard. It's very hard. I feel incredibly lucky to have supportive family, even if they're not close by. I have a partner who is so engaged and involved. I have financial stability. I have a safe place to live. And yet, it has been incredibly challenging. I just want moms to know you're doing so well. Your baby is so lucky to have you, and help is out there if you need it. For me, last year felt like every day we were scraping by. Every day I was trying to just figure out the day, get through the day. There was not a whole lot of room for systems, for plans. This year, I really want to systematize as much of our parent life as possible. You know, planning our son's meals so that it doesn't take so much energy every day, every week to like come up with what we're gonna feed this kid for the next 17 years of his life. Plans and systems with my husband around housework, around all of these shared responsibilities of just like being an adult. Sorry, chasing those shadows again. I also want to prioritize things that make me feel like a whole happy human again. Getting back into making YouTube videos was part of that last year, in the second half of last year. There's other things that I want to do with my time this year, now that I've kind of like the clouds have parted and I can like see the light, you know? I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I love to read. I did not read a single book between May of 2023 and January of 2025. I was reading like 30 plus books a year and I went down to 0. So I am reading books again. I'm a knitter and I would really love to take on a knitting project this year. I mean, I would love to do a few. I'm thinking about making a new sweater, so that's exciting. I love to walk. That was a big part of my routine in the spring and summer and fall of this year, like taking our baby out on walks, walking with my husband during the day. But I just yesterday pulled out from under the bed the dusty walking pad that had been tucked away since we converted our second bedroom into the nursery. And I've just walked a couple of miles yesterday and a couple miles today, and getting back into moving my body in ways that make me feel good. I also want to get back into cooking and eating in the ways that like feel nourishing for me. I do have like hereditary cholesterol, heart stuff that runs in my family. And so like I know the diet that is actually like good for my health and my longevity. And that is not to say that like other diets are not good. Also, I've been eating like crazy since I got pregnant because I had such wild food aversions that like I was so limited in what I could eat. You know, I was just like eating for survival and then eating for convenience. And I really do want to get back into like giving my body the best for me. It has been a crazy ride. I really do have trouble thinking that a whole year has gone by. But then again, I'm like, this is my whole life. Like this is my whole world. And what was my life even like before I had this love in my life? I don't know. I promise most of my videos will not be like this. I do hope to get back in the kitchen, do some fun cooking and baking projects. I've got some like home organization projects I want to tackle soon. We've got like lots of baby clothes that need to get like put into long-term storage, things like that. So yeah, I hope that you will stick around. I really thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a thumbs up, leaving a comment. If you're postpartum, I hope that maybe this makes you feel a little bit less alone in the crazy wild ride that it is to be postpartum. My heart goes out to you. You're not alone. And I'm just so glad to have you here, and I'm so grateful for how far I have come in the last 6 months and how much I've grown in the last year. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.